we welcome Christopher Cerutti. Chris, to the show. What's
Thank
up,
you.
my man?
Nothing much. Enjoying being back in College Station. I went to Mad Taco last night.
Yeah.
Always a favorite whenever I was here. So
Yeah.
it was good to experience that again.
Yeah.
Although there's a ton of new places here. I also drove by RX Pizza, I think. So a lot of different things calling my name.
If you have a chance to try Howdy's Pizza,
Okay.
it's south.
Yeah, they're right next to each
south.
other. And I was like,
oh yeah, you're right.
I was like,
Yeah, try Howdy's.
if I want pizza, which one do I go to?
They're both good, but my wife and I swear by Howdy's.
Okay.
What is your favorite superpower?
I'd love to turn a weakness into a strength. So on StrengthsFinder, I found out empathy is my 34th strength.
Okay.
I'd love empathy as a superpower.
Okay. When I think of empathy, there are people, one in particular out in LA that I think of as just this person kind of instantly knows what's going on with me. And I feel like can always like spiritually kind of get right next to me in that moment. What are there people who are particularly empathetic that you have really admired? Or when you think, I want to be able to do that, or, just imagine something that you would want to be able to do with that superpower. What do you think of?
This isn't anyone famous, but my best friend is probably the most empathetic person I know.
Okay.
He just has had a variety of experiences and is always, he relates to everyone so well. Like he's the person that you always want with you. And you see that all the time because you'll be hanging out with him. Like he'll get 10 calls within 30 minutes, like, hey, come hang out with us. Hey, come hang out with us.
Yeah.
He's just that person that can relate to people and just really reach you on an individual level and be with you in that moment, which has just he's been my roommate, or he was my roommate in college. And over the past 10 years, it's just been an incredible learning experience watching him do that. And I've gotten a lot better at it too because of him. And mainly where I've gotten better at it is just like understanding people's mannerisms.
Oh.
Like he can have that emotional connection, but just like watching people react to the things you say or the way they're carrying themselves around you has given me a lot of social cues that I didn't always recognize before.
I do believe that you've gotten better at it, because if you were to ask me what stamp did you leave on our class and on the MBA program following our graduation, I would say it was kind of a legacy of like warmth and positivity. And you and I have talked some about that.
Yeah.
But I would never have guessed that empathy was your 34th strength.
Yeah, so in my top 5, individualization is in there. And so I think that's what I have to rely on to overcompensate for that.
I see.
And so what I've come to realize is I can understand, or I can know and understand when something's wrong or something's a little bit off. But in terms of establishing that emotional connection, that's where I struggle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that. Give us 60 seconds on your road to Maze.
The biggest thing that drew me to Maze was community. And so real quickly, grew up being a tennis player. It's an individual sport. Going to UT, there's this collectiveness of being a Longhorn and an Austinite, but it's all about being individual and quirky there.
Okay. Yeah, I believe that.
And so you really grow individually. And then my next role out of undergrad was very like confined to being just in at my desk, not really interacting with a lot of people. And so I've always had this sense of wanting to work with others and collaborating. And so A&M provided that sense of community that I was searching for.
Interesting. Let's back up a little bit. Where did you grow up?
Carrollton, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, North Dallas.
Yeah.
So grew up there. Originally grew up in Arlington, moved to Carrollton in middle school.
Mm-hmm. How many in your family?
4. I have one brother and my 2 parents. Now it's just 2 of us, my wife and I, in San Antonio.
What was your first job?
My first job was just kind of typical mowing the lawns around the neighborhood. First real job was working at Michael's Arts and Crafts. It was right next to our high school. I had a couple buddies that worked there.
Yeah.
And that was my first retail experience. And I never thought I would be in retail again after that. So it's interesting that I ended up going to HEB and being in retail.
Yeah. What was it? I mean, obviously, many of our first jobs are not experiences we would necessarily want to repeat. It's often formative, but not always enjoyable. But what was it? What was it that made you think you would not want to be in retail again?
I know this is really a small thing, but glitter. Like Michael's was filled with glitter. And one thing that I found out later is they always stuck me on the Christmas aisle during that season. And it's just filled, like I would just come home covered in glitter. And my buddy that worked there for a few years already ahead of me, he goes, "You know why they put you on that aisle, right?" And I was like, "No, because I'm the newbie." And he goes, "No, because you're the only employee that actually spends time cleaning it up."
Nice.
And so he was like, you just got to be average like everyone else when it comes to that aisle and excel everywhere else.
My friend Sunday Stewart would tell a very, very off-color joke about glitter, which I will share with you after we're off the air.
Yeah.
What was your greatest challenge as a child?
So hindsight now, or I'll say then, competing with my brother. It was always a competition. Right. Who could do better?
Older or younger?
He's older.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was the typical annoying younger brother.
Yeah.
I played that role 100%. But now I would say it's taking risks. I was a goody two-shoes growing up. I did everything by the book according to what my parents wanted me to do. And I think that's where it took me a while to end up figuring what I wanted to do and what I was passionate about. Not that they controlled my life, but I just stayed within their parameters.
What did they do?
So my dad worked, he was in banking. He worked for JP Morgan Chase. And then my mom ended up staying at home. My mom has a physical disability.
Oh.
She has drop foot.
Okay.
And so it just limits her ability to walk around, and she has a limited number of steps every day. And so working full time and taking care of 2 kids, because my dad was traveling every single week.
Yeah.
Which just like it wasn't physically doable for her. So she had to do one or the other. And luckily my dad was successful enough to where she could be at home.
Sure. Yeah. My mom has a physical disability as well. Did not when we were growing up. It's called hereditary spastic paraplegia, and it's manifested mostly later in life. She was always, I feel bad about it now because she was always kind of clumsy when we were growing up, and we were just kind of like, "Mom, get it together." Yeah. And she would like sprain her ankle, like just stepping off a random curb. And so at the time it was really frustrating for us because this sort of thing would happen pretty regularly. Yeah. And it was just kind of like, just pay attention to where you're walking. Like just,
well, it's scary. Look, it would kind of frighten my friends the first time they ever came over, like see her fall because, it just happened occasionally. And she always did it gracefully and laughed afterwards. Yeah. So good, decent sense of humor about it. But it definitely impacted me a lot in a positive way, because once I understood it better, just like I've definitely learned that one of my acts of friendship and acts of love is helping others. And it's really strong. And I think that has a huge influence over that development.
So let's contrast that with what you said about empathy earlier. So you feel that you're instinctively equipped to flow out to others and to give to them, but you feel like there's some kind of barrier between you as far as finding emotional community, or what's the contrast between those two things?
I think it's like the best way I can describe it is I can follow you all the way up until, like, if you're crying, I won't sit there and cry with you.
Right.
Like a lot of the people I know that are most empathetic will reach you on that level. Okay. And I just can't take that next emotional step. So like if you're extremely angry or frustrated, I will be unwaveringly calm. So
I feel like sometimes that's what we need, though. when we're upset. Like if Kyle makes me cry, as he regularly does, then I don't know if it would be more comforting to me if you get upset also on my behalf. Like and maybe others feel differently. I mean, I'm strange in a lot of ways, so maybe I'm different from everybody else in this way.
When you were talking to, I listened to some of your more recent episodes. I think it was RJ Heckelman.
Yeah, RJ Heckman.
You were talking about knowing what your significant other wanted at that given time, like whether it was listening or advice.
Oh,
or,
true.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Biochemistry at UT, inside sales, to MBA at Texas A&M. You talked about looking for community, and you drew a contrast between individualization and being your own self, being quirky and so forth in the Austin community. And then you were looking for more of a sense of belonging. Can you talk a little bit about what inspired the transition? What made you think, oh, this community is really strong in this way, but I actually need something slightly different? What led you to that conclusion? Or was there a moment where you realized, you know what, I want this instead?
I think I had a couple Aggies around me in that time frame that just talked so highly of it, and just honestly, their passion got me passionate. Like I think that's one area where I can really match people. If you start getting excited about something, I'm just instantly excited about it. And so, being a Longhorn, I never would have thought about it before, but they just talked so highly of this institution. I wanted to at least check it out. And then just like the whole interview process, that A&M was so welcoming. And then the admitted students weekend was terrific, getting to know people. So I just,
I believe that's where we first met.
Yeah. So that was, it just, you always talk about person, company fit. And it felt that way to me. I just knew at that point.
Well, we're glad you came.
Yeah.
We have a ton of respect for the University of Texas, but obviously A&M has a special place in our hearts. Any funny stories from your early post undergrad days?
Yeah, so these are more like stories you go back and laugh at, and you kind of had to be there to experience. I'm not a great joke teller, so it's more experiences kind of had to be there for thing. But right out of undergrad, I was trying to I had a one extra semester because of the transition from degrees in undergrad. And so I found a place where two guys were already living. I mean, it was an absolute dump. And
we've all done it.
Yeah. I think I was in Austin, and this was still near downtown. I was paying like $250 a month, which is unheard of.
Holy hell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, the funny part about that is it was so bad that like in the middle of the night, you could hear mice crawling across the AC or the air ducts, and it would just freak you out. And it's just one of those things I can go back and laugh at now. But, I had that experience afterwards. And then the first guy I worked for, because we were doing sales, we'd go and meet with clients locally in Austin, and he would always drive. And he's by far the scariest person I've ever ridden with, because he would drive about 115 down Mopac. And just again, something you can go back and laugh at now, but he was the type of person, it would be bumper to bumper traffic, and he would drive 60 down the shoulder, ignoring everything. Right. And so that was always an interesting experience.
I'm sure it was. Before entering the program, why did you want an MBA? What made you want an MBA?
So you mentioned it. I was a biochem undergrad.
Right.
And went into business. I was helping grow a segment of the business I was working for. So I worked for a company called Facility Solutions Group. They're an electrical and lighting contractor, but they bought a signage company, and their forte was large custom scale signage. And so they did stadiums, they did large shopping malls, And essentially what it meant for them was they got to talk to the client earlier, because that's determined a lot earlier, that contractor relationship and the whole bidding process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was helping grow out that side of the business for the rest of the company. Anyway, I had all this business intuition, but had no idea if it was right or not.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to learn it, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I wanted to go back to school to actually learn business and see if what I was thinking was matching up with what was best practice, what was actually going on in the world. And then two, even though I was helping grow out this business and that was exciting, I knew I wanted to switch careers. And so this was a good stepping stone to do so.
Have you read David Epstein's book, Range?
Mm-mm. Highly
recommend. And I think it's a really good book to read for career switchers. I've switched careers twice now.
Yeah.
And I think you'd find it really, really edifying. Let's talk about the culture of an MBA cohort. If an experienced person making a career change or not making a career change, we're coming back to business school, what culture surprises should they expect in dealing with their MBA cohort? And you mentioned groupthink when we spoke on the phone the other day.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this one a lot. And I think one thing, now that I'm looking back at it and thinking about, we had some challenges in our class.
I think every class does.
Yeah. And I think
it's a bunch of competitive people all getting thrown in the room together.
Right. And I think one thing that we all were told, that we were already overachievers, that we already excelled in our careers, and that's why we're here.
Which is true.
Yeah, which is true. We were hand selected by the recruiting staff to come and be a part of this program and add to it. And I think the one thing that we forget about a lot of that is a lot of us were career switchers, or maybe we were staying in the same field, but we wanted to advance our career. Yeah. And so there was a natural unhappiness coming into this program.
That's a good point.
Because people weren't satisfied with their, well, I wouldn't say they weren't satisfied, but there was some level of dissatisfaction with their career thus far, and they were trying to jumpstart it to get farther ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
And so I think that's what leads to some of the difficulties, is because people are already, there's that slight level of dissatisfaction that you can quickly jump to that whenever you're at a stressful point in this program.
Right.
And so I think, we just had some of that endure during our stint here. And, it was a challenge.
Sure. What do you think, what's the culture hack that you would recommend coming out of the program? What's the one weird trick that no one thinks of in creating a positive culture? Because as mentioned earlier, you were a tremendous force for positivity in our class. How did you do that? Or what's the thing that you learned from that process that surprised you?
I realized I relied too much on the precedent of A&M's culture to help influence our culture as a class.
Yeah.
So all the things that drew me to A&M were extremely powerful for me, but that doesn't mean they were extremely powerful for everyone else. And so I think I naturally just said, well, people are here because they believe in A&M's values, which for the most part I do think is true. But just like, because we're only here a year and a half, you have to do everything on steroids, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I think we needed to, and I know the new classes are doing this, kind of formulate our own class culture and define what that was ahead of time. So
really smart.
I think just like right now, HEB is going through a transformation. We've had to redefine what our culture is to incorporate this new talent in terms of all the technological talent that we're bringing in to help bring us into the digital age.
Sure, to compete with some others who are in this space.
Yeah.
If you were talking with an MBA student who's right in the thick of things in their first semester, when everything's just flying by, what would you? And you can't lean on the school culture necessarily. You said that some may not respond to the culture of the university as a whole or the values that the university espouses. What would you say to them? Would you say, if you're trying to help them move through it or to handle their situation in as classy of a way as possible, what would you tell them?
Do their best to find a silver lining in the situation, find a way to learn from it.
Right.
Because it only adds value once you're out of the program. Like, I know we'll talk about this later, but in terms of like what I gained out of this program, but ultimately it was so many intangibles and not, yes, you learn a lot of skills here, but the intangibles are what I took away the most from this program. And just those, in those moments when you're extremely stressed, what you're going to do and how you're going to interact with your cohort and your individual teams. I think just always keeping the larger picture in perspective is the advice I'd give them.
Right. But what do you think was the most important core skill that you were really able to hone? And when I say core skill, just to clarify for the listeners, I just mean what we used to call soft skills. So the emotional part of it, the empathetic part of it, perhaps, the ways of relating to people.
Yeah.
What are you better at now?
Well, this is slightly different than the empathy part, but or I'm going to take this a different direction. But I told you I lived within parameters growing up.
Sure.
I think it's taking risks and accepting failure were the things I learned the most from this program.
That's an answer that we get often, is that people are becoming more comfortable with the idea of failure and the idea of taking risks, and if it doesn't work out, whatever, like, who cares? And along with that, I think people are becoming more comfortable with career switching. Back in the 50s, you were expected to spend your whole career with one company. Grandpa was with, General Electric until the day he retired. And now it's nobody's career is like that.
Yeah.
To spend your whole career. I mean, I guess my dad is probably the exception. And even he did multiple things. He did consulting and he's taught here for 40 years now, but he has a consulting business. He owns another company as well. And it's just very rare to see that sort of career consistency, which I think is a good thing. And we're becoming more comfortable with the idea that you work forward. And this is a theme in that book Range I was telling you about. You work forward from favorable situations. And it's kind of strange because it used to be make a plan for where you want to be at the end of your career or the end of your life, if you wish, and then work backward from that. And then now the conventional wisdom seems to be work forward from favorable situations. But I think the best answer is actually kind of a hybrid of both. Yeah. Like you want to sort of have this sort of long-term vision for, I'm kind of vaguely moving toward that. But in terms of how you get there, like it's very stepwise in terms of, okay, what do I like about my situation right now? What do I want more of in my situation right now? And where am I trying to get to, and how can I smash those two things together? Yeah. Does that make any sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. One thing I struggle with the far out picture.
I think we all do.
And Dr. Mark Antonio pointed this out to me, and she told me I was going to struggle with this because I have such a one of my other strengths, top 5 strengths, is learning. Okay. And one of the downsides of learning is that you can find so many different things interesting that you'll pull yourself in so many different directions. You actually don't know what your defined path is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And another thing learning as a strength does is it lowers your sense of accomplishment. Because you consider that part of the learning process. So if you did something that was pretty well received, or you got congratulations on, or whatever it may be within your company, I'll diminish that success because I consider that was just me learning. I just enjoyed doing that, and so I actually struggled through interviewing because of that. because I didn't highlight some of my successes enough.
Interesting.
That's one of the great things about HEB is like my background is everywhere. And that was also one of the things you said it yourself, biochem to inside sales, which was in construction. And then did a really short stint in food before I went back to school.
Yeah.
And they loved that. And one of the big things about HEB is, just they feel that you can do almost any job. They want the culture fit rather than the skills.
That right there is the best argument in the world for diversity. And I'm not just talking about racial diversity, gender diversity, orientational diversity, that kind of thing, because all of those things are important. But it's going back to the same thing we were talking about a minute ago, the idea of not being afraid to make switches, which can sometimes be seen as a failure, but really diversity of background and putting a team together where you have people coming from different perspectives. It's the best way to solve what are referred to in the book range as wicked problems, where the environment is constantly changing and you don't just get to repeat the same challenge over and over again, and new elements are going to be flying in. New curveballs are coming in from left field, forgive the mixed baseball metaphor, all the time. That's what you want. You want people who have addressed problems from many, many different walks of life.
Right.
So it's no wonder they wanted you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but I'll say what's interesting right now is as we try and get into this digital age within HEB is for the first time, we're having to actually be more selective on skills. Because we need to bring in really talented engineers and customer experience or UX designers to actually get us there. Rather than normally what we would do is we would take existing high-level performers in HEB and have them go do that project. And so this is really the first time we've had such a high influx of outside talent.
Just because the e-commerce space is so specific and so important? Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It seems like an interesting time to work in retail. 3 to 5 years from now, what ways do you see the grocery industry transforming? We're seeing, curbside is kind of a pretty standard thing for larger grocers at this point. What is going to continue changing? What can you tell us?
So I think the big thing is really we know it's going to be a truly omni-channel effort. That's what we're banking on. And Amazon acknowledged it by buying Whole Foods. They said, we need stores. We can't just do this online grocery business anymore.
Right.
And so the race for us is, can they become a great brick and mortar retailer like we are faster than we can become a great digital retailer?
Yeah.
And so that's the race we're having with them right now. But ultimately what I think it's going to become is more personalized to that customer. I think whenever you go in the store, we're going to find ways to make that store experience more personalized to you rather than, we always joke that if you went back to the 50s and you go into a grocery store now, you would almost see no difference. And so how do you build the store of the future that complements your digital experience with a physical in-store experience? And one company I like to follow because despite their stock going down, they continue to invest, and this is Nordstrom. So they've invested in making their stores a lot more flexible. So department stores have always had these individual sections.
Yeah.
And you knew it because even like those sections they went from tile to carpet. So you knew that was a section in their store. And so one thing they did is they got rid of all that. So they can change their store, if they wanted to, 4 times a month.
Right.
And completely redesign it.
So it used to be organized by, for my understanding, I haven't spent a lot of time in department stores, but it seems to me that it was mostly organized by vendor previously. How do they organize it now if they've completely changed everything?
I mean, they still are doing some of that because people I think it may depend on the department store, but Nordstrom, you're going in there to buy brands.
Yeah. Okay.
JCPenney may take a different approach.
Right.
Than that. But I think it's just the thing we're going to see is brick and mortar retail stores can be more flexible,
right,
with their setup in order to cater to the customer needs during that given time frame.
We've touched on Amazon a couple of times.
Yeah.
How do you retain customer loyalty? H-E-B, especially in Texas and in the South, has a very strong brand. How do you retain customer loyalty in an era where that means probably less than it has previously? Everything's about reviews, ratings, and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that Nordstrom is about brands, and there's a lot of loyalty there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably less true, although still to some degree true in the grocery business. But H-E-B's brand is pretty impeccable. How does the company plan to keep that strong?
Yeah. So I think, one, what's interesting is Amazon has not quite figured out how to deal with regional grocers.
Mm-hmm.
So Wegmans, Publix, H-E-B, Meijer, we've all done really well, despite the large impact Amazon has had in the grocery business now, as well as, you just think about what Kroger and Walmart are doing. They're investing heavily in digital. And so I think what continues to separate us as regional grocers is just knowing our customers the best. And so it's great that Amazon can run all these algorithms, and they're great at analytics.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely astounding at analytics. And we're good at it too, but at the same time, they don't have stores in all of our communities in Texas with store leaders that know customers, that see customers every week and say, how can I make your life better this week?
What can you say about an H-E-B customer? Like, how is your customer different from a Publix customer or someone who lives in, Maine?
Yeah. So there's a great article in Eater. I don't know if anyone has ever used that site, Define Restaurants, eater.com.
Okay.
But they did an article on what makes H-E-B more of a cult than any other regional grocery, because Wegmans has a very strong following. Publix has a strong following.
Sure.
So does Meijer. And so what makes us the biggest cult of the cults in terms of regional grocers? Right. And they summarized it as, we sell Texas. And I think that's so true.
Oh, okay.
We have Texas-shaped chips. We have Texas shaped like packaging and all this stuff. And we also celebrate Texas vendors. So we do a thing called Quest for Texas Best, where we bring in hundreds of vendors to test their products that ultimately there's, it's kind of like American Idol. The winner goes on shelf, but also some of the second, third, fourth, and fifth place will still end up on shelf as well.
Sure.
And so anyway, I think we champion Texas, we celebrate Texas, and it's, Texas pride. It's such a strong thing. And we're very focused on that, but also, we do capitalize on it. To be perfectly honest, we capitalize on Texas pride, but we do a lot to make sure we're catering to the community. So one of the biggest advantages that we have, but also is our biggest challenge, is we tailor our assortment for every store,
mm-hmm.
And for that community. So we have certain stores that are in predominantly Jewish neighborhoods. So the amount of kosher products we carry in that store is like 100 times larger than any given H-E-B. Same thing with stores around the border. We're definitely more tailored to our Hispanic customers down there. And so we get to know our customers in those given communities and make sure we carry what they need.
Does that require that you center decision-making more locally rather than corporately?
Yeah. So I think one thing that has made H-E-B incredibly successful, and we talked about this in Zarkui's class, is centralized decision rights versus decentralized.
Right.
And so we have we give our stores a lot of power to make the best decisions for their customers. But at the same time, we have a very strong, talented, and powerful buying team that brings in great products for our stores to be able to sell to customers. And so it's a balance that we've been able to strike over, it's 105 years now. And so I think it's just one of those things that's hard to replicate how we've distributed decision rights at this point. But it's a nice balance of more central versus decentralized. Now, where we're really having to change things up for the first time is in this digital sense. So because our decisions rights were so decentralized, to advance the business from a technological perspective in the past, we had technology teams serving specific business units. And so that specific business needed to take a step forward. So that technology team solved for that specific business problem. And then in the meantime, another team took a step forward and they solved for that specific problem. And so we each started branching out farther and farther. In the meantime, whenever we had issues between those two, we would Bandaid it. Or it was essentially a Band-Aid. And so now, every company has their legacy systems and has this problem, but now we're having to rip a lot of those off and bring digital decisions very centrally, very much to one team to understand their overarching impact across the entire organization. So even down to the store partner, how does that affect them if we change this?
Right. In the process of implementing all this, what does your day-to-day look like? What are you spending the most time on right now?
Yeah. So
in terms of what the consumer will end up seeing.
Yeah. So just quick background, I work on our digital merchandising team. So if you've ever done curbside or home delivery and shopped that experience, our team is essentially trying to influence your basket.
Okay.
We are trying to we're trying to make your basket larger, more profitable,
sure.
Et cetera. And so one way to do that is, every company, online retailer does it, but, just with the homepage, trying to distract you to click into something to view what we have.
Yeah.
But mainly my day-to-day right now is I've been leading our A/B testing efforts across site for merchandising. So essentially what that means is it's an experiment. So half our customers see one thing, half our customers see another thing, and we're determining the impact of that test. And so if what we change is beneficial to the customer, then we'll keep that change. And we're trying to make it beneficial for both parties. So beneficial for them, but also beneficial for us.
Right. It's interesting because oftentimes, what if a customer buys something, at least in the moment of buying, they feel like it is beneficial for them. So is there ever a moment where you say, people are buying this stuff, people are buying a particular product and it's selling really well in this testing, but we feel like we're getting some blowback in the reviews, or we feel like they're regretting this purchase later. Do you ever have to reconsider how you're influencing buying in the moment because of things that happen after?
We monitor search engagement.
Yeah.
Meaning if, that's what I was kind of talking about, being beneficial to both parties. So we can drive the business and drive customer experience down. We've actually seen results like that, and we quickly turn those off because that's not good.
Right.
If that means we're frustrating our customer. The whole reason they're going to curbside or delivery is for convenience. So if we are not meeting them there and that ideal, then we shouldn't be doing that. And so
makes sense.
We monitor search engagement. So we've definitely seen instances where we've driven up sales and profitability, but overall the search engagement is going down for that particular page or that particular search term. And what I mean by that is they'll refine their search or they'll search for something differently. And so we don't want that. We want them to only have to search once, find what they're looking for, and move on
Okay.
and shorten their shopping experience, which is difficult because you're also trying to influence their shopping experience to make their basket larger. So you have to really balance. It's a balancing act between convenience and influencing them without frustrating them.
Right. Let's move to some rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
MBA president. Learned a ton doing that. I think the biggest thing I learned was when we changed up the structure of how people got voted in or appointed to the MBA org or governing body. We had a lot of pushback, and I think really essentially what happened is we went from voting to appointing people, and I thought it was the right thing to do. And what I ended up doing was I let the blowback get to me, and I backed down from my decision, what I thought was right. And Dr. McGowan talked about this, about diversity and inclusion. What we did by appointing was have that diversity and inclusion in the governing board. But if we relied upon voting, we often didn't get that. And that was one of the biggest challenges, and not something, well, I'm sharing it now, but not something we shared with the class at that time.
It's interesting that by doing appointments, you actually got a better outcome than through voting, like through a democratic process.
Right. Because something that we always wanted on the board was definitely, we wanted female representation as well as international student representation. And because just naturally, we always have a strong international student presence, but it's just not nearly as large as the rest of the student body. And so it's just hard for them to come in, get situated, start advocating to their classmates that, hey, I want to do this. I want to be a champion for our class.
Yeah.
And so it's just hard to get there. And honestly, I think that was just not sticking with what I thought was right was one of the biggest learning I had during the program. Because it was a true moment of, what is my leadership style? Why did I choose to do this? And so a lot of reflection happened after that, because it not only made me question my original decision, but it also made me question my relationships with people in the class. Were they only upset with me because of this decision, or like, is this going to affect our relationship moving forward? So, it was something I struggled with, because I've also learned from this program, I have extremely high group approval. And so being a part of the decision that made so many people unhappy really challenged me a lot.
What do you think is people's biggest misconception of you?
That I'm analytically driven, which I am, but I'm not necessarily fantastic at analytics. So one thing I'm struggling with right now at work is I have the misconception that I'm our analytics guru, which I'm not. When you look at my top 5 strengths, analytics is number 1. But if you look at my complementing top 5, I'm analytical in people, not numbers. And so when I do...
That's an individualization thing too.
Yeah. So when I look at work, what I'm trying to achieve at work is being a leader in customer behavior. And yes, that involves quantitative aspects, so I do those, but also getting in front of the customer and understanding their qualitative feedback as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I like most about my current position is kind of that psychology piece you get in, and understanding customer behavior and what, influencing them and what you actually want them to do.
Yeah. If you could have anyone as a mentor for one day, who would it be?
Yeah, I've been trying to think about this one for a while. My first thought, and I think I'm going to stick with it, is Warren Buffett. Yeah. Honestly, because I'd love to be able to write like him. I got his, one thing I read after school was this woman put together like a collection of his letters to shareholders and like kind of put them in a, she grouped them and then also put them in sequential order. And just like the amount you can learn from that is incredible.
Yeah, he's a wonderful writer. So much clarity.
Yeah. And if I could explain stuff like that, I mean, my communication has improved so much, but if I could explain things the way he does, I feel like that would really help get my ideas across a lot better and just help explain things that I've learned to the rest of the team.
Business writing. People think business writing is straightforward, and it's not. Like oftentimes you have 13 synonyms you can choose from, but which one perfectly captures the meaning that you're going for?
Yeah.
A couple of great Tim Ferriss questions we've been using lately. What is the book you've given most often as a gift?
Okay. Getting back into psychology, The Undoing Project by Michael Lewis. I absolutely love that book. And I haven't necessarily given it, but I've recommended it at least 50 times to people. And I actually brought it up at one of our team meetings last week as a reason of why I'm so interested in customer behavior.
Yeah. If you could have a billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
Take the time to listen. As we grow in this digital transformation that we're going through at HEB, like we're so focused on getting the job done that I'll say that we have been susceptible to relearning a lot because everyone's so focused on getting the job done that in these meetings, if we just took the time to listen to each other, we'd probably get a lot more accomplished.
Yeah. Anyone you would like to send good bull?
Yeah, I would like to send good bull to my parents. Yeah. I was fortunate enough for them to actually send me back to grad school. So that's something they always knew they wanted my brother and I to do. So they actually saved up for it, which is quite amazing and quite empowering to know that someone's willing to go to those lengths and make those sacrifices so you can have a better life.
No question. Chris, thank you so much for your time, my friend. We appreciate having you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. We appreciate your support. Drop us a like below and feel free to leave a comment if you wish. We appreciate positivity and constructive feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes and bonus content. You can also take us on the road using your favorite podcast listening app. We have those linked below. If you'd like to know more about Mays Business School or our guests, visit mays.tamu.edu/podcasts. Talk with you soon.